guest has had paranormal experiences since she was a teenager. Today in the research community, she is known as a telepath, psychic, and remote viewer, someone who accurately sees distant or future events. She has contributed to many experiments and papers on paranormal phenomena. She has been welcomed into the indigenous cultures, including the Huichol of Mexico, the Haida of Alaska, and the Shamans of Mongolia. In 2011, she was initiated as a Mongolian Buriat Shaman. In 2014, she was awarded an honorary doctorate from Mongolia's National Academy of Sciences. She is working on a small, medium at large, her memoir, which is getting close to publication. Let's welcome native New Yorker, Gail Hayssen. Welcome, Gail.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, in a time when so many different awakenings are taking place across the universe, where so many people are somewhat going down like a rabbit hole of discovering new dimensions of their own personalities and new realms of things that they've never really looked into. Here comes along a person like yourself who has had the experience and the wisdom to learn a little bit more about what lies beneath the surface and what we don't always see. And some of the work that you've done, which is inspiring to myself, is an inspirational, I'm sure, to a lot of people who are on this path. So maybe you could just give us a little bit of background on where you came from and how you got into some of the things that you do now.
Well, you mean where I came? I came from New York.
Yeah, you came from New York. In terms of
Born and raised.
well, a lot of people come from New York, and being in a multicultural, environment where you take in so many different energies and so many different things to learn. But a person like yourself coming from New York is not usually likely that a person gets into shamanism or into the work that you're doing.
Well, I have to say that's probably one of the things for me was that I left New York to visit California once during high school. And when I came out here and spent a couple of weeks, I had never actually spent a lot of time in the country or next to creeks and redwood trees and the beautiful area where I have now been living for the last 50 something years. So I left New York because I didn't feel good I love New York to visit, and the intensity and charge that it gives me and the stimulation is unbelievable. But on a continued basis, for me, I'm very sensitive. And so if I was in an apartment building, which I never lived in New York, I lived in a house, but if there was that kind of a space and there were people on each side of me, I would be feeling what was going on in the other people's apartments, and that can get exhausting. So I knew that I needed to be in a place where I was surrounded by nature and I need view. So like when I wake up in the morning and I look out my bedroom balcony or my space outside, I see mountain, I see vineyards, I see trees and forest and birds and clouds and sun and moon rising. And for me, I need to be connected to that. And so I would say that my decision as a teenager to not want to live in a city, and I wasn't interested in getting dressed up and wearing fashionable clothes. And so I never really felt like I fit into that New York crowd, because especially back then, you had to be dressed up to do things. It was the New York life. So in coming out here, I got exposed to so many different modalities of things. And, during the early 70s, which is when I came here, there was so much self-help, classes you could take or courses. There was so many things. There was your Rolling Thunder, you had your shaman. You had all kinds of things going on. It was a potpourri of everybody doing things,
Right.
but they were all at least towards consciousness and uplifting and being on more of a spiritual path. And so there was so many things to choose from. Some people went with the Hare Krishnas, everybody was finding their way at that time. For myself, I ended up being involved with this group that was led by a guy named Werner Erhardt. And one of the teachings in the workshop that we took with him, which was 2 weekends, and I did that when I was, I think, 16, right before my 16th birthday, that class was to teach you what now we call remote viewing, but then was called cases, where you would be given the name and the age of someone, and you would look inside their body from a distance and then report what you saw. And then you would do a healing on the person with light or whatever you imagined. So I would say that would be my first experience of being exposed to the fact that we have the ability to see in distant and not necessarily have to be in the presence of a person to actually connect to them.
Right.
And it was also where I was also learning that for me, this was like a natural ability. I didn't have to be trained to do any of this. So I'd say that's really where it all kind of began.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of dreams as a child. I did a lot of astral travel as a child, where I would leave my body and float around my house and see everyone sleeping, including my own self. And I had a very spiritual grandmother who was from Poland and had, immigrated to New York when she was 18. And she talked to the dead, and she talked to the family members that were gone, and would report to you in the morning who she spent time with during the night. So these things kind of, I think, planted a very good seed. And I realized one of the best things she did was she explained to me near-death experience without me realizing it till, I don't know, almost recently in the last few years, I realized what she had taught me, but never knew that it was underneath in me. And so that's why when I experienced near-death at 21, I wasn't as filled with any kind of fear of it, because she told me when she was young and they were stuck in Poland, it was typhoid fever. And her sister died in bed near her of typhoid fever, and she watched it all happen, and she had typhoid fever. But she said when she had typhoid fever, she said she rose out of her body, and she's telling me this when I'm like, 9 years old.
Wow. Wow.
She rose out of her body and came up, and she could see her body there and everything that was going on. And she thought she would just be floating off. But instead, I'm not sure exactly what happened, if she had an interaction with a family member or someone who said, no, you can't go yet, you have to go back.
Right.
And she said she talked about the feeling of falling back into her body and coming back into the body and realizing then she was going to live. And when that exact thing happened to me, giving birth to my daughter at home, my first child, and I had no doctors or any medical persons or a midwife or anything, I had preeclampsia and toxemia, and I was dying. And when I got rushed after 36 hours purple to a hospital nearby, on the way there, I left my body, and I wanted to tell everybody that everything was going to be fine. I was going to deliver this baby. It's all good. But when I looked down, nothing was coming out of my mouth except drool. And I looked at the people in my family in the cars, because there were two cars driving to the hospital. And everybody looked so terrified and scared, and I couldn't comfort them to say it was going to be fine. Because in my feeling, wherever I was, it seemed like everything was great. And I experienced, when they got me into the ICU, I was having this amazing experience of lights and flowers and music. And I thought this was what birth was really about. And it was not what birth was about, but I didn't get to find out till 13 years later, when I had my second child in a normal birth, where it was just the pain and delivery and the pushing and everything that it takes to bring a baby into the world. There was no lights and candles and flowers around in my, my space. And so I never realized till most recently how those little stories that she shared with me as a child rooted into me thoughts that those things are possible.
Right.
And that, that near death is an experience that you can, that's what you come back from it. So I'm very thankful to have had that kind of a grandmother to expose me to her world, which became comfortable for me when I experienced some of the same kinds of things.
Yeah, what's interesting is the fact that, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, we go through certain traumas or experiences or physical, dilemmas in our life that help our soul expand or break through the physical body itself. And for most of the times when I'm speaking to people who have had near-death experiences, obviously there's a detachment of the soul from the body, and the person sees their body from a certain place. They either
Mhm.
see what you saw, what you heard, and most of the experiences is something similar where somebody tells them, "Go back, it's not time now," or so on. In your case with your grandmother, I guess it's funny sometimes. I guess maybe sometimes people prepare us for what they see may happen, so we have that information prepared in our unconscious or higher self to prepare us. What would you say was the impetus for you prior to the near death experience of having these qualities? Were there traumas that you experienced? Not that you have to get into them, but
Yeah, I won't get into them, but we had a very unconventional family life, and we were raised differently than your regular run-of-the-mill person in Flushing, in Queens, where I grew up. And we were exposed to a lot of things that other people that now today are very common ways of living. But back in the early 60s, when my dad went vegan and we were raised on raw fruits and vegetables and no doctors, no dentists, and healing had to be with your own body, with fasting through water. That wasn't common then. My dad was growing wheatgrass juice. Nobody was doing that back
wow.
then. So now he was always ahead of his time. Now this would all be accepted behavior, but back then, either we were made fun of or the family didn't want you to spend the night with them, or whatever different things occurred because of that type of lifestyle.
All right. So after these personal experiences that take place, was there a great desire to seek further knowledge on these particular subjects on your own, or were you influenced by other people who are guiding
Well,
you?
from 15 and a half to 17, I did hundreds of sick bodies, and I would do healing on them, and with my intention was a good intention. And I had a very bad experience of uh, one of the souls of one of the dying people I worked on trying to possess me. And when the organization there and Werner Erhardt wouldn't help me with any of that, and I was so young and didn't know what to do, I said I would never do anything psychically like that ever again. And I never did until 1998 when I met Dean Radin and Russell Targ. But from the 70s until that time, I only let what happens to me naturally happen. Like I've never someone like people say to me, "Oh, can I hire you to do a reading?" I don't do that. I do whatever comes to me naturally. That's part of the information. And so from all those years, I would have dreams foretelling the future, or I would have gut feelings about something and no, don't go this way, we'll be in an accident, or I would say, oh, so and so is going to die tomorrow. So, I mean, all those things happened in all those years. That continues to be part of who I am.
Yeah.
But for me, it's a normal way of being. It's not special or gifted or something or other. To me, it's how I am.
Yeah.
But in 1998, when I met with um, Dean and Russell, I was willing to participate in their experiments because there was no money involved. I wasn't being paid. I don't believe in being paid for the things that come to me from the invisible. And I felt that the things I was doing was helping them to educate other people through their scientific research what was possible. So I felt like that was a good thing, where what I had been doing in my teenage years was I was really being used for whatever my talents are, so that these people could make money by selling courses to people. And so I was just, I was a shill, and I was just really being used that way. In working with Dean Radin and Russell Targ, I had the exact opposite experience where I was being respected and ended up building really wonderful, long lifetime relationships with these people. So I'm very grateful that I gave up my no, I will not do another psychic experimenty thing or whatever again until I met them. And I'm glad they were such safe and wonderful people to work with.
Maybe you could just elaborate on what the experiments exactly entailed with Dean Rader and Russell Togg.
Well, I did many experiments and I couldn't tell you the names of them because I forget after, but the most documented and significant ones would be the ones that I did in remote viewing. But before I talk about the remote viewing, we also did things like an experiment where you look at photos and you have to say, is the person dead or alive? Or experiments where you have headsets on and the computer is going to show you a very scary photo and your body is being physiologically monitored, like your heart rate and your sweat and different things about your body's, information to see how it changes when you do have these kind of experiences.
Right.
Then I think, let's see, what was another one? Oh, then there was the one where you would hold an item of a person and the person would be in another room at a computer and you would tell them about themselves and what happens or what you know from feeling this object and holding the object. And there's a bunch more, but I can't remember them all at this second, but they were in those kind of veins.
Yeah.
The remote viewing is the one that I did the most of. And I had a very good success rate for them. And I think twice when Dean Radin gives a talk for the Navy in, I don't know where it is, Michigan or somewhere in some state, both times he went, he showed remote viewings I had done, and they were very impressed with it. That's why he said he did it the second time, because they liked my remote viewings. So that was kind of, I don't know, thrilled to think the Navy saw my remote viewing. And during the time of them doing remote viewing with me, I also started to learn, and I only did a few of these, but I worked with a couple of missing persons, and I had interesting stories and experiences with it, but I didn't want to pursue it because it's like a scary feeling, and your body gets really stressed and tense when you're looking for a site where a person might have been murdered or something like this could happen. And I find those just take too much out of me emotionally, because I feel for the persons or I feel for the family's loss, or so, it's more than just an experiment for me when I do some of those things. So doing the remote viewings, I started to learn all these things because I didn't know I could do remote viewing. I never called the cases we did remote viewing.
Right.
But it was something that was able to show me, like when you're guided by Russell, he's an amazing, what they call the monitor or the interviewer. That's the name of the person that's guiding the other one through the remote viewing. And he's just a phenomenal a monitor interviewer. And so my success rate with him is just really, really good. And I feel incredibly comfortable with him and like a deep connection, and the information just flows out. So him and I did numerous different trials together over the years, because we've been doing this together. We started in 1998, and just last year at the end of November, December, Russell and I did 13 remote viewings, of which we started on the phone doing them because it was COVID. And then we moved to Zoom. So I have about 5 of them recorded on a Zoom for my own history of remote viewing. And I'm not sure if your listeners know, but there's a video that you can watch on YouTube, and it's free, and it's called Third Eye Spies.
I
And
saw it.
Third Eye Spies is Russell's, he worked very hard to put that documentary together so that people would know he declassified all this information to be able to publicly share it with the world, so they would know what went on for 20 years at Stanford Research and what these men were doing. And I highly recommend that for anybody interested in remote viewing to watch that show to find out about the history and everything about the program. I am in that, actually. I was in the original movie, which I got to see at a conference, but then when it became to be released to the public, they had to shorten it to a lot less because some of the CIA came in with a lot of information about the time that they were doing this. And that was much more important than the remote viewing Russell and I did. So he put it in at the end. There's something called the extras. So if you watch the extras in his film, and this is what I'm talking about, you'll see him and I doing remote viewing together. It's also, for any of the people interested in remote viewing, I should at least explain what remote viewing is or how it's done.
I was going to ask you that.
And what it is I'm going to explain ones that we did. What it would be is that Russell would have either an object or a photograph. And when we did this last session of 13 of them together, he'd have the object in front of his desk. And we would talk on the Zoom or the phone, and I would describe the object to him. And here in the house, I would draw on a paper what you see. And there's a specific sort of training with remote viewing where they don't want you to say, oh, it's the Eiffel Tower. They want you to say tall structure, metal, designs, so that they're not asking you to say, oh, it's the Eiffel Tower. They're just asking you to describe what you're seeing. And I had some funny experiences with that because the first 20 that we did was called precognitive remote viewing. And precognitive remote viewing is when I would sit with Russell at the computer at Interval Research. This was in Palo Alto. And he would say to me, it's 1 o'clock now, Gail. Let's sit down and I'd like you to draw a picture that's a place in the world. It's a real place. And it's one of 300 National Geographic photographs that we've put into the computer. A random number generator will select the photo. Tell me what photo you think this would be. Now, I didn't even know I could do these things till they asked me to do them, so I didn't know that. Well, I could sit down and do this without being trained. And he said my attention to detail was excellent. I'd see like a stone in a riverbed and draw the exact stone that would be in the picture. But I'd had this weird experience because at the end they show you, and that's part of the feedback is very important for the remote viewer to know the feeling of like, oh, I really was right on, or, oh, I was way off, because not every remote viewer that does this gets it 100% of the time. It's just like a basketball player or any profession where, you're not on the top every time. So I'm writing down and putting in my drawings people and cars and boats. And then the pictures would come back and there'd be no people or cars or boats. And I'd say, God, I can't believe this. I don't know. I guess I'm not seeing the right things. I'd have the other things in the picture, but it would be missing these things I thought I saw. At the end of the 20 trials, because then it gets evaluated by a few judges, and they rate each picture and they decide how close it matches and it gets ratings. So when I meet with the man who did this, Ed May, also very well known in the remote viewing field, he tells me, I say to him, I was just very disappointed. I said, I really thought there were boats and cars and people in a lot of these photos. And when I'd say it, it wouldn't come up. And he turned to me and said, oh, we took them out of the pictures. We found that very confusing for people, so we erased them out.
Wow.
So I found that very amusing. And in fact, in one of the recent ones Russell and I did, I'll hold up a picture of it. When we started the picture, and this is the one we just did a couple months ago at the end of the year, he says to me, nobody has remote viewed this photo. He said, and it's something, and I'd like you to tell me what it is. And the first thing I say is, oh, there's a lot of vegetation in the photo. And he turns to me in the Zoom and he says, let me stop you right there before we begin. I took out all the vegetation. So the photo you will see will not really have any vegetation. So In fact, I'll read you what he wrote and then I'll hold the picture up. This is Gail's remote viewing target received over the phone 100 miles away. I asked her to describe the photo I had on my desk. I told her that I didn't know very much about it and she should just tell me what appeared to her awareness. I couldn't answer any questions. I am told that this is a well-documented Canadian photo. Gail and I had just completed a similar trial, number 11, on a weekly series in which I had a musical instrument on my desk. The following are the recorded words on her drawing. Could be a rocket ship. Propulsion. Energy, powerful. There are no colors in this remote viewing. It's like a temple, like a very tall, like an Eiffel Tower. This is what we call analytical overlay when you write these. A rock, a statue, a positive feeling, and a ritual prayer. So I don't know how well you can see the drawing, but this is the drawing, and these are the circles of energy going up, 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 up.
Wow, wow, wow.
The first things he said to me was, Gail, I've known you for 20 years. You've never used the word propulsion.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then this was the photo. It was
Uh-huh.
an unidentified flying object with
About,
a United States jet following behind it.
wow.
I think it's from the 50s, I'm not sure. But he was told by Jacques Vallée, who's a very famous scientist in the world of UFOs and very highly respected French from France. And he said, nobody could remote view this photo because it's multidimensional and interdimensional. And so when we finished it, he told me that. He said that was not supposed to be, nobody's supposed to be able to do this photo, he said, but I'm going to call Jacques right now to let him know that it can be remote viewed.
Wow, wow, wow. That's excellent.
That's kind of a sample of how we do it.
Yeah.
And also, for me, when I do remote viewing, I usually have the information within the first 5 minutes, but they may allow 20 minutes to do some of these experiments.
Right.
And then I start to space off and start to think, oh, well, maybe there's this or maybe there's that, but really what comes in the beginning is the correct
Yeah.
information.
I've taken classes with Angela Thompson Smith, so I've done the remote viewing.
Oh,
And
yes.
actually, when you
She's a wonderful teacher and person.
yeah, when you said something, I saw around like a sunflower
Ah.
before you started. So it turned sideways maybe. Yeah, the interesting thing for me is getting into this realm or to this way of thinking or this surrendering, so to speak, of our ego, and just being in a state of acceptance and openness. For myself, I do Akashic record readings. So when I do the readings, for me, that information flows, that download comes down, and because of that, that step of me going to that place, I've recognized the fact that in certain instances, I do see, in other words, I guess the remnants of a person's energy coming into my presence gives off an illustration or an image of where they've been or what they've done, like a cloud of their experience. So
And it
when
could be this lifetime or maybe other lifetimes if you're looking at Akashic records, correct?
yes, 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 yeah. Well, I got into it because I found a little bit about my personal past life, which had to do with World War II, through my present life dilemmas, physical stuff that was going on, looking at vents in the ceiling and getting a panic attack, and then having people read my records and told me a little bit about my World War II as a doctor in a concentration camp. So, yeah, I was a Jewish doctor in the concentration camps, and then meeting people in this life who actually told me that I remember you, and I said, from where? And
Oh, that's wonderful.
yeah, it was.
I mean,
Yeah,
not great that you were.
no, but it's a cleansing feeling to try to remove these past experiences. But as it relates to, God,
Before I sorry when I interrupt, but I'm afraid if I'll forget the thought last. That's one of the problems. We had a Siberian shaman here, Ladomira, and she did a specific ceremony that exactly about what you're talking about, which is getting rid of your aura or your
karma.
body, whatever, this history of ancestors that we carry from generations to generations. And the way it was done is you had a partner with you and you laid down with your shirt off on the ground, and very slowly with very specific type of, so I'm telling your listeners not to just go out and do this. You have to use a certain type of wax. I don't remember which candle wax it is, but a certain one doesn't burn as hot as other waxes. And with that candle, you go from the top of the head of the spine and you slowly drip the hot wax down the spine of the person's back. And as you do this, images come up like just out of nowhere, like visions of things that have to do with the ancestral heredity that you're carrying with you from whatever traumas it could be, whether it was the Holocaust or burning at the stakes or whatever different things that maybe your, not you, but the DNA of your family, your ancestors went through.
Yeah.
And we carry it with us in this life, is what she was explaining. And something about that wax experience, at first it's terrified me at the thought of somebody who's going to pour hot wax down my back slowly.
Right.
And yet it was not like that. It was a very powerful experience. It wasn't like painful like that or something. And it gave you unusual memory or vision at the time that it would be done.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a person gets a massage in terms of certain chakras of the body or different places in the back that release certain energies or experiences, right? Depending upon the side. So that's a very interesting concept. Speaking of shamanism, you know, it's very difficult for a person, I guess, like yourself, to tie yourself and label yourself into a category. And I guess
Yeah.
so be it that you didn't really want to do that or label yourself. I guess it's more of the experience itself rather than being in a fixed place. So maybe you could describe a little bit about your connection to shamanism.
Well, I was in the Bowery in New York, and I was with Russell, my friend Russell Targ, and he was bringing me to meet the most famous remote viewer in the world, Ingo Swann. And Ingo was an, you know, when I meet these people, I feel like, you know, my remote viewing is like this and theirs is, you know, like this. You don't want to compare, but you're just like, I'm amazed at, you know, what he was able to do. I mean, he viewed, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but Ingo
Yes.
viewed the rings on Jupiter that had not been seen yet by telescopes months before they discovered it.
Yeah.
And these to me are factual. How can you not believe that someone didn't see this when he saw it and it hasn't even been seen by the man's eye yet until a telescope finds it so much time, you know, so much time later. And after we left when we were leaving his house and saying goodbye, and he was surrounded by the most beautiful, he made huge mural-sized paintings of the cosmos and the stars. So that's all in his, you know, where we're visiting and talking. And when we get up to leave, he looks at me and he says, you know, you're a shaman. You just don't know how to be and act like a shaman. And that was the first time somebody ever said anything like that to me. So I never thought any shaman anythings. So now I have to give credit that I think that's where the seed got first planted.
Wow.
So it was then that I became involved with something called the Shamanism Conference, or what was it called? Shamanism and Alternative Modes of Healing. And it was a conference that was held every year on Memorial Day, I think. Memorial Day. Yeah, at the end of, yeah, I think it was Memorial Day weekend. And it was held in a space in San Rafael. And the woman, Ruth Inga Hines, whose conference this was knowledgeable about Asian shamanic, like she wrote books and was like one of the most knowledgeable people and a Berkeley professor. So she held this conference every year to bring shamans of all different cultures together, not one shaman, but maybe 7 or 8 different shamans from all different parts of the world, bringing their translators and sharing their knowledge or their ritual or their ceremony, and letting, you know, 100 people participate in something like this. So I don't know of anything like this that was going on. I mean, this was back when I met her was 2004, I think. And I was doing that experiment with her I spoke about earlier, where you hold something in the hand of someone, and it was an object of hers, and I didn't know her. And this is how we got to know each other, because I was able to read everything from the ring in her hand. And she was like, "You're getting ahead of me." She had a heavy German accent. She was from Germany, and she had lived through the war, and she used her psychic. That's why she didn't get crushed in buildings and killed, because her psychic would tell her inside, "Go there right now," and she would do that, and then the bomb would hit or whatever happened.
Wow, wow, wow.
So she grew up in that, and she never had any children. So she felt that all the students and people that would come to her conference, that was like she birthed all these children. So we met at the Institute of Noetic Sciences doing this experiment for Dean Radin, and I offered her a ride, and that's where our friendship and relationship began. And I became sort of like, I helped her out whenever I could at the conferences, or I'd bring her something to eat, or ask me to do something. And in 2005, she had Mongolian shamans arriving. And everybody was so excited because they found this on the internet, and they saw our conference, and they said, "We want to come." And they arrived, and she says to me, "I don't know what happened, but there's no translator. So I want you to go up there to their room, settle them in, show them where the food and all the things are, and tell them what time they're giving their presentation and what they need to do to be ready." The word of Mongolian, but she felt confident in me that somehow I'd know how to do this. So I went up there. I had the most interesting experience, and I met a person who I'm actually going to be speaking to in a half hour from now in Mongolia. Well, actually, at 7 in an hour from now. And we've been lifelong friends since then. And I met the shaman that he brought. He brought a whole delegate. There were 6 or 7 Mongolians. I don't want to spend too much time explaining how hysterical it was to try to explain things to them. But the most hysterical part was when I was trying to help them open up their suitcases and put their clothes and things away. And the shaman, when he opened up this huge suitcase, I mean, a giant, the largest one you can have when you go on the plane, and there was no clothes in it. When he opened it up, it was only filled with dead animals and birds and bones and feathers and all the shamanic tools. And I'm thinking to myself, what's he going to wear? Where's his underwear? So this is my first exposure in this way of like a more direct, of shamanism. And we have to hook up telepathically, which I happen to do very well in other cultures, which is why I've had these doors open for me with the Huichols and the Haida Indians and these Mongolian people. And somehow we communicate in a telepathic way. And I've felt that a scientist, they need funding, but someone should do an experiment about how can we telepathically communicate when we're not in the same language, period.
Right, right.
And I've done it many, many times, and sometimes word for word what the person is thinking. Because when we finally get a translator, they say, "Oh, I don't need to say anything because you said what they were going to say, and they said what you were going to say." So it's really, you're both communicating. So I know factually that we were. It's not like I'm just assuming that we did.
Right, right, right.
So in that communicating and getting to know them this way, and I'm showing them around and whatever, I've always invited all these shamans to come back to my home. So here at the shamanism conference, there's shamans from Laos, shamans from China, shamans from Nepal, shamans from South America, shamans from Central America, Mexico, so they're coming from all over the world. And if they're available to have any extra days to come up, I had built like a little shaman center in the back of my property, but now my daughter lives there, so the shaman section is closed now. But we would do ceremonies there. So they would come and we would do small, intimate 15 people events, 15 or 20 people. And I would learn from them as they come through, and they would just give me these gifts of different shamanic tools, different shamanic items, herbs from Siberia, things that I just kept collecting. In fact, well, not sure what you're supposed to say these days. One of them was a very ancient, made out of bone shamanic tool that this Zorix Batar used, and he gave that to me. So all I'm saying is to you, I never asked to be a shaman. It started off with Ingo Swan telling me that I am one and I just don't know how to be like one. To me being involved with welcoming shamans and being in their rituals. I've done walking on hot coals, being blindfolded in my orchard with hundreds of trees around and walking completely blindfold in, rototilled soil and not falling or getting hurt, being guided by a shaman. When I did walking on hot coals, I didn't think I could do it. And when I finally did it, she just took my arm and said, let's go, we're gonna do this. I did it 5 times after that. It was the most powerful experience to run across hot burning coals and not experience one feeling of pain, not even, like when you just touch a match head, it feels hot. So I don't know I don't claim to know all the secrets or any of the things about how shamans do these things.
Right.
All I can tell you is that I've experienced it with my own eyes. And I've seen incredible healings with shamans, and I've seen them do amazing work here with people that may not even speak their language, but they're dealing with the language of spirit, and they work with spirits. Mongolian shamans have the spirit enter their body and they become that person. Like we had this amazing, beautiful 28-year-old shaman visit, and she was she could be on the cover of a magazine, beautiful. When she put on her Mongolian clothing and she turned into this crotchety old man, you would never think that that young person was there anymore. That's how embodied the spirit of another being came into these shamans. And these are the Mongolian shamans. And for your listeners who don't know, in Mongolia, the 2 religions were Buddhism and shamanism. And shamanism to them is a very ancient time, back to the days of Genghis Khan, where all his men were shamans. They all had to play the jaw harp. They all had to do shamanic rituals. This is, if you go to see museum pieces of his that have been discovered, or maybe they're not his, I'm not sure, but you see thousands of year-old mirrors. And every shaman, in fact, this was given to me by a shaman, a Mongolian shaman, you'll see this kind of a circular brass, they call it the mirror. Well, I found in other shamanic cultures, there's a mirror. They made in the Huichol, there's a mirror. You find common things you see that it's different cultures, but the shamans use a mirror device. Is it used to reflect negative energy? Is it used for them to look into the person's soul? This I can't answer what exactly. Each one has a different method of maybe what the mirror means to them. So I was given mirrors, I was given shamanic clothing. So when we were here, and I've been to Mongolia twice and spoke at 2 conferences there. On the second conference, I brought my family, 2 of my 3 children and my husband, and they got to participate in all these different things, shamanic and Mongolian. And when I did this there, I met this woman, Zagda. And Zagda was a very powerful shaman, and she's doesn't speak a word of English. And she is doing a lot of work now. She travels around the world and gives talks at different international shamanic things. And she was coming to the United States. And so she came to my house. My house has been open to Mongolians since I've met them in 2005. So that they've been coming here for 18 years. So it's 18 years, 2005.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, it's a long time.
Yeah.
And she stayed here at our house, and we showed her the redwoods and the ocean, and and then she left. Then all of a sudden I get a call a couple days later, and she says, well, not she, but somebody tells me, Zagda's coming back. She saw spirits all around your body. She needs to initiate you into Buriat shamanism right away. So I said, okay, you know, I mean, I really didn't know what I was up for, what I was getting into, or any of this. And she came back to the house, and for 6 days, we worked from early morning till the wee hours of the night, producing all the things necessary to have this initiation in 6 days. And it involved things with the wool of sheep. It involved with things with fat, and these are all different parts of the ceremony that's being used to feed the tree with the fat, or, you know, there's different symbolic meanings for all the different things she was having us do. The most hysterical one was when she told us we needed dried horse shit. And could we go out, and we live in the country, we live in, you know, people have horses around us, cat, you know.
Yeah.
And so my husband thinks of a neighbor down the way that has a horse, and he goes to you know, shovel a little bit of the dried shit he'd seen, and he comes back and he shows it to her. Mind you, this is with no translator, so we're doing just charades to do this. And he comes back with this little cup of this handful of manure in a little bag, and he's so proud. And she looks at him and she's so mad. She says, "This is not enough," you know. I mean, she's not saying it in English, but you can see on her face. And she goes to my husband, "Get in the car." They get in the car with a shovel, a big regular shovel, not a little garden shovel. And she said, "I saw horse shit, the kind I need." And when we had taken her on a walk, she saw it around one of our neighbors, around all their plants for, you know,
Bloom.
fertilization.
Yeah.
And she went there and they shoveled it into a bags. And it was really, she was looking for like a giant garbage bag full, not a little handful. And it was used in the circle when she created an invisible, in Mongolia, it's called a ger, but here we call it a yurt. She was making a yurt for the entire ceremony, and there needed to be burning, which is what they use in Mongolia. It needed to be the dried, certain specific dried horse manure. And then when you set it on fire, it makes a very sweet smell, and it's cleansing the whole circle. And it's just very important. And then she turns to me and she's looking very puzzled. And I just look at her and I say, "I know what you want." And I go upstairs to my bag full of things that have been given to me, as I said, over the years, all these shamanic things.
Right.
And I bring down this little Ziploc bag of some dried looking herby thing. And she looks at me and she says, she's so happy. It was the thing that was missing, that was from Siberia, that somebody had given me on one of these visits.
Wow.
So we had all the things she needed, and it would just arrive. If she just said the thing, I'd walk out and find what she wanted. It was like magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we had the ceremony here, and I didn't realize until she did this with me how important this was for me to have this happen to me. She gave me a container, or she gave me a title, or she gave me I don't know, she gave me a focus. She gave me something so wonderful in initiating me as a shaman. I know it's a big popular thing, and people are, "Oh, I'm a shaman. This one's a shaman. Oh, $3,000 they become a shaman." This was not like that. I was
Right.
never looking to be a shaman. This was what she knew she should do, that I should experience. And after she did it, when I went into an altered state, because you go into an altered state, she has you chanting and dancing and drumming for so many hours in the heat that you just go into it. It's a out of body transformational kind of experience. Afterwards, I felt like I was complete now. Like I'd never gone to high school. I didn't get a high school diploma. I didn't become a therapist, even though I'm always helping to take care of other people and doing what I can to help them. So I never had something like that. And I never felt there was one I fit in.
Right.
But this one I fit in with. And so from that, what I do is, when I do things with my shamanism things, I put on all my clothing. And when a friend or somebody I don't know happens to come to me, I take them out on my balcony and I do what I call a blessing. Because I feel like when I say healing, I don't know, blessing, healing, something, I don't know exactly what it is.
Right.
And I use all my different shamanic tools, and I just go into some sort of a space that I feel connected with the spirit of that person, or someone maybe that's dead or died, or other people that might be around that person, that I feel there's a message I'm supposed to deliver for them. And so I only do it, and I tell them I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if anything will happen. Maybe nothing will happen, but we'll just leave it open and see. And I haven't had anybody leave without looking brighter and happier and lighter when they leave.
Yeah.
We've made a connection with either someone who has died, and I don't know necessarily the person who died, but I hear information. And so then I give that information at the end, and I say, I heard this from your, someone came to me and said this and this and this, and they know what it means. So you know that you've hit the right thing.
Yeah.
So I don't do a lot of them. I just do them when somebody's in need or asks me. I don't advertise or, come to me and I'll do this or that or anything like that. It's only, like I said, it's only like naturally what happens. And I'm learning some more different tools to work with. And I'm studying, I'm going to just start this August, I'm going to start to learn about sound healing, because I've been doing sounds on all these people's bodies, and yet I don't know exactly what this method is of sound healing. So I'm going to learn about that and kind of integrate that in with my precognitive or cognitive information that comes when I have these experiences with people.
Yeah.
And I'm just eternally grateful that she did that.
It seems what's interesting to me is the fact that it seems as if this was a past life or a connection for your soul's purpose, so to speak, right? Your soul had to be fulfilled, and rather than a life purpose, the soul was noticed, and then you were placed into this position to do the work. It's interesting. I studied. When you say studied, I had a desire to do shamanism. Whenever I do readings, people would see a Native American sitting behind me, a father, a grandfather, and everything. Lakota was coming through. Everything was Lakota, Native American, Lakota. I would see people with tattoos. I would open up a book and it would be Lakota, Native American. And so I have this desire, but I've always had the interest because whenever I do my own journeying, shamanic journeying with the drumming, I see a grandfather who communicates to me for healing, for myself, and for doing the work a little bit like, obviously not the extent, nor to have the honorary positions that you're holding and being up this level. But for me, when I do a healing session myself, which is a Quichua tradition, which is the Ecuadorian Andes mountain, it was done to me, but somehow or another, when I'm working with the clients, I'm getting information from the deceased from them that I pass on as well. So I'll tell them what their grandfather said, or what I see their life, their grandparents' life, and how it's impacting them right now. So I understand that part, but I think it's an honorary feeling to be able to be as diverse as you are, and to have these experiences in your life, to be able to share them and to offer them and be grounded, but also be up in the heavens or in the universe. It's inspiring. It's inspiring for me to hear.
I have to say, it's a very unusual way of being, but I'm made up of these two strange ways. And one is this spiritual, out of body, whatever abilities thing, that's not, it's not an object, it's not a thing.
Tangible. It's not tangible.
Right, it's not tangible. And then at the same time, the other part of me organizes, manages real estate properties, an incredible amount of stuff. I've had numerous businesses. And so I have this whole other part of myself that's exactly opposite all that. Yeah. And they're usually more extremely one of this way or one of the other, but I seem to have both of those worlds. And it's a funny combination. I remember Russell introduced me when I worked at the Institute of Noetic Sciences for a couple of years in the research department. And when he introduced me to Marilyn Schlitz, who was in charge of the hiring and whatever things, he said, she's very psychic, but she's very organized.
Right.
That was such a weird, I realized later, oh yeah, you're right.
The balance between the masculine and the feminine, the left and right hemisphere.
So this I am grateful for, that I've never had. Part of me thinks, well, I've never had one path or one, I always am willing to try all different things. And I always be skeptical, like, I never believed in spoon and fork bending. I figured, well, there must be some kind of trick to this. But when I bent my first fork and the tines are going around like this and all this, I think I have it over here, it is. And I bent my first fork. Here's what, I don't know if you can see it.
Wow.
See, it's twirled around like a bunch of times there. I didn't believe in that. I said, I don't know. Let me see that. So I'm not one of these that just says right away, oh, yes, I don't say it can be done, but I don't know for sure if it's real. But then when I do it, then I have to say, and I can't unbend it. Then I have to say, oh, this is something that people can do. That
How long did it take? How long, what was the process of what's the process of doing that?
Process of doing these, like, so here's a fork, here's a spoon. I'm trying to get more twirls now, down to 4 twirls. I did this in a spoon bending class where there was it was in a hotel at a remote viewing conference. And this man who was the most well-known for teaching spoon bending, who's passed on, Jack Huck, Houck, if you want to look him up. I think that's how you spell it. He throws down a whole bunch of silverware on the, hotel floor, but you can do this in your home. You don't have to go to a hotel. And he says, go and see which spoon or fork calls you. And as you walk around on the hundreds of pieces, pick the one that you feel a connection to. When you pick it up, you hold it in your hand like this, straight up and down. And you start to just rub the metal a little with your hand. And you yell, and everybody's screaming in this room, bend, bend, bend. And you focus on this item. And there's this moment where the only way I can describe it, and I'm not a bender, like I had a guest on one of my podcast shows, Donna Ribadow. She didn't know she was a bender, and she went and took a class, and she's bent hundreds of silverware, hundreds. We bended on my show. I did a bending. That's how I did this spoon, was on our show with her. I don't have a talent for that. She's done hundreds. She's making jewelry out of them now. This felt like when I was touching the metal, all of a sudden there was a moment where it turned into molecules. That was the only way I can describe it, that things were like jumping around. And in that moment, you feel it. And the metal turns to liquid. And you just go like this, and it just bends. And that's how I can describe it. I don't know any other way. Though there are some people that in that class, there was a little old lady behind me, a school teacher she was there to see what her student was doing. She had never done, she wasn't there to do spoon bending, and she was holding the spoon like this, didn't do a thing. And I was in front, I saw it before my eyes, and I was like, wow, the spoon just bent over in half like this.
Wow.
And she hadn't even done the whole work yet. So I think some people's energies have a natural relationship with the metal and the thing, and then others, ones like myself, we can do this, but I can't do this every time, or like every second I'm going to be bending spoons. But we did do a lot of they say don't go to use restaurant spoons and don't use your house.
Right.
Get your silverware from the thrift store or somewhere, because before you know it, you're going to be bending up all these things.
I wanted to ask you, with regards to the remote viewing, are there any specific remote viewings you've done that haven't happened yet, but you foresee taking place? That's
a very nice question.
Can you commit yourself?
I can answer that with one, and I can't. There's a very amazing man named Stephen Schwartz. He has something called the Schwartz Report that he does, and his remote viewing in the 70s, and I don't know if it was 70s and 80s, is he had a team, and he had a submarine, and he had ships or whatever, and they were able to go and find places in the ocean where ships had been lost. they were able to find places where like the original place where Alexandria, the corners of where the Alexandria began, the city or something. And I forget what they all are. And he had some things where he found things about from Cleopatra. No one can ever deny any of his work, because if you read his books, it shows you that the remote viewing, everything is filmed. So you can't, there's no trickery. You can't, I mean, he is the most respected from his work about what he did and what he discovered for historical purposes. So he called me December 15th, 2019. And this is right before COVID happened, like almost weeks. And he said to me, I'm doing a second project that is remote viewing into the future. He said, I've done one already, which I think you can go online and read about it. There was more than 1,000 participants. And this one that we just did, the first one was done, what will 2030 look like? And we're getting close to 2030. And some of the things, what they do is they collect all the data and the things where everyone says pandemic, 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 or whatever they see in the future, that then becomes the list of what is the possibilities of the future. They don't just take every person's thing. They want ones where they find many people have said the same thing. So he asked me to remote view 2060. And that was the strangest thing I'd ever been asked to do. And I sat in my house here where we are right now in this on the computer, and he zoomed it or whatever, he recorded the whole thing. And I think I ended up going for over an hour. And I can't tell you all the things I said, but I remember some of them, but it unfolded in front of me like a movie. And as he'd ask me, well, what are cars like? What's the money like? How are people? Where do you see when you go to this part of the hemisphere, or when you go down into the, Australia, what's it like there? Or when you're up in, where are you now? And it's hard to explain these kind of things, how this happens. But information just comes flooding in. So I did a few drawings of some of the things I'd seen on little Post-it notes, and there was a lot of sadness that I felt in this 2060, and I couldn't find like children running around. It seemed like the cities where everybody was so like automated or something, and the cars were all the same, and they had rubber wheels, and they were like above the ground and very quiet, but they all looked the shape the same. And there was, when I started to look, and I ended up like in a countryside and, more of a country kind of area, that's where I saw children and families. But when I was in the cities, it wasn't like that. And it felt very gray and cold and unwelcoming feeling. And I can't tell you, because there was an hour's worth of information, and I can't repeat it because I don't know where I go when this happens or where the information comes from.
I understand.
So I'd have to watch the recording and see all the different things I said. But he did send back to me a comment that it was a really good remote viewing. So maybe it did have matches to a lot of other people's things that they said. But it was just something I had never done to go. I said to him, I realized that, let's see, I think I was 66 or something when we did that, or 65, whatever age I was. I realized that my youngest daughter will be that age in 2060 and she would be alive to know what was this world going on.
Yeah,
So that to me was a very unusual experience.
yeah, I've listened to a few of Stephen Schwartz's interviews in terms of his prognosis or his remote viewing sessions with people, I guess like yourself, who cooperated with that. It's very interesting in terms of where we're headed now, or where we are right now, on the precipice of a shift. I mean, I could feel the energetic shift taking place in the background. Is that's a little bit of a tense feeling somehow,
Yeah.
especially on maybe specific the fires that are coming through that are taking place from the north. The lack of trust,
Weather, the hatred that's coming out amongst people. I mean, it
Yeah.
feels like there's a lot, I don't know, there feels like there's a lot of stuff happening, but that my hope is that that means there'll be a better, something will happen. That is this a cleansing? I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah.
and COVID, just how that kind of alienated people from each other and created all this like distance. And anyway,
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I spoke to a shaman who explained to me the concept of what was taking place, a universal spiritual battle
mhm.
from above, and different galaxies above taking place, the same exact thing. Good versus evil energies taking place, even the specific wars that are going on right now in the Ukraine and between Russia. In terms of, I just wanted to ask you about your, if just quickly, if you could talk a little bit about your book, your memoir that you're writing.
Oh yes, I'd love to. Um, I when I was interviewed by Dean and Russell many years ago, in 1998, they both told me after they finished the interview, you should write a book. And I had been told that by all these people all my years since I was a teenager. Your life stories, you're this, you're that, you should write a book. But I always thought it was one of those, everybody says, oh, you should write a book. It's just a whatever. But when two scientists told me, I actually went home and in 6 months produced a memoir. And then I just let it sit here for the last 20 years and I hadn't done anything about it. Russell had hooked me up to a couple of publishers, and back then nobody was interested in a memoir. They weren't popular back then. Apparently they're more popular again. And I was never one to send out a million letters or do any of this because I just felt like I was very healing to write your life story. And that's what I did. I wrote my life story and about all the different things that happened and the different dreams and things that, it's all like a synchronization thing where if you look at your life in this big picture, you see how this thing affected and that's why this thing happened. And then that turned out to be that thing. And there's was that 6 degrees of separation or something, where
Right,
things
right.
all start to make sense. And so I decided that I got contacted by someone, Sean McNamara, who's just an amazing remote viewer telekinesis. He's written amazing books. Um, he had never met me, but he heard me on Jeffrey Mishlov's show, and he decided to find me through Facebook and contact me and tell me, I really don't know what this is and I don't know who you are, but while I was washing dishes, I knew that I should tell you you should publish your book. And he said, and I will help you self-publish if you like, and I'll send you everything on how to do it. He sent me 8 pages of very thoughtful, step by step, how do you self-publish and what you do and all this amazing stuff. So then I decided, I'm going to finish the book, get myself an editor, and self-publish like he says. So I found a wonderful editor, a lovely woman in New York, of course. She's in New York. I've never met her, but she's been working on my book and she's finished editing the entire thing except the ending, which is either 1 chapter or 2. I don't know. But I'm writing this ending and I'm working on it, and I end up getting 2 different inputs. One is I go to a friend's 90th birthday, Stanley Krippner. He's a very well-known psychologist on dreams. And at his birthday, we meet this lovely, nice man. And it turns out his company is publishing the memoir of Stanley, and they would be interested in publishing my memoir as their second book in the chain of books of memoirs. So I got encouraged by him, knowing that he's interested in publishing it. And then this other man, Sean. So from these 2 men's inputs, I went back to the drawing board, and I'm now finishing up. I'm really hoping to have this done by the next month here. It's the stories of my experiences of Mongolia and being initiated as a shaman. That's what I'm working on right now. And Russell would like to write the last few pages in my book about the 13 experiments we just did, the
Wow.
13 remote viewings. And he just told me that last week when I was visiting him to have lunch together. And so I'm inspired by these 3 men who, one wants to help me with the ending, one maybe wants to publish, but until you have a signed paper, you don't know whatever.
Right.
And then the other man, so I know in 2023, my book will be released. Which way it'll come through, I just leave that to how it happens,
Right.
going with the flow. And I'm working on this, reviewing all my Mongolian experiences and all the things that I've had in these years with them and trying to condense it. I have 75 pages about Mongolia, and I'm trying to shrink it down now.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
And also, I was very, very fortunate during my shamanic initiation, which lasted over 6 or 7 hours, that a very dear friend sat there and documented every single thing that happened. So I'm able to share that in my book because I was in an altered state. I can't tell you what I was looking like or doing at that time, but she did. So I'm able to really share the full initiation experience from what was happening inside of me and what the people were seeing from the others, viewing it.
Yeah.
And the publisher had said I wasn't going to add all that in. And the publisher guy said, you should really put those stories in also. And so that's what made me from what I thought was a finished book to now adding this new section in there.
Yeah. With regards to your podcast, where could people,
Oh, so any of your listeners, if you want to check out my podcast, it's A Small, Medium at Large, the same title of my book. And I just aired my 50th show on Wednesday. It comes out every other week on a Wednesday, every other Wednesday, and we've never missed once yet. And hopefully it continues that way. And I have guests from all different walks of life. And I like to share stories about healing, but it's really stories that are intimate.
yeah.
I want to know about their childhood. I want to talk about, personal things. I like to talk about experiences. I'm not interested in like a whole intellectual kind of
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
I
Yes.
really
Yes.
want to talk from the heart. And my guests have been the scientists we've spoken about, many different people in remote viewing, psychologists. The one I have coming up in 2 weeks from now, which will air, middle July. She was, and the other part is I have nothing to do with this show. The people just appear, and I just naturally do this, and I have no experience really at this. A friend of mine was visiting in Taiwan. This is how these things happen. He's there on a Fulbright. He's dealing with social work, and he's written many books, so he's there speaking at a conference or something. He meets this woman who's done unbelievable work in social work, helping young women and girls in Taiwan and in other countries with baseball. And she's the first female umpire in baseball in Taiwan's history, and they're big baseball people.
Right.
And she grew up as a childhood psychic, a teenager.
Wow.
Who had to work in the temples at night doing shamanic exorcisms and readings of people's problems and giving them cures for their sicknesses. And she was, 16 years old.
Wow.
So when he met her and found this, he said, "You should be on Gail's show." And she agreed to be on my show. And I don't know if she liked me very much because I'm so maybe wild, or I don't know. But she was the most impressive, inspiring woman to change gender in sports for women. And she was honored by the United Nations she just received a big award at the United Nations. She's gone to other countries, and, she came from a struggling, financial background where she couldn't get any umpire equipment. And the Yankees bought it for her when she came and did translation for them.
Wow.
And other sports companies helped her. So these to me are like beautiful stories to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now she's taken that and her influence and her, financial pictures and all this, and she's turned around and helped so many young women and girls, not only in Taiwan, but in other countries, where she goes and sponsors and teaches young teams to play baseball of young girls, but not to become a baseball player or a sports person, but to become someone who stands on their own and makes their own decisions and isn't told that they're only meant to be a wife and have children and be in the home.
Absolutely.
So it's an unusual groups of guests I have. So I had Tommy Chong on for 2 shows. So they're all different characters.
Yeah, but what's interesting is the fact that you're able to surrender to the universe and not commit yourself to any type of not, I wouldn't say structure, just the fact that you're like an open channel allows all these things to flow your way and into your life. And it's such an inspiring, it's an inspiring example. And it's so inspiring for me to see this, because I know myself, I see so many people who are very fixed and afraid of letting go. And the fact that you let go and you've had this opportunity to learn to let go and to take in different cultures and, you know, just be in this position is it's amazing. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, is there a way they can reach out to you, where they can?
Yeah, I think that I have a website, a small medium at large.co. And if they go there, they'll see there's a place I think in there where you can send a message or contact me or something like that. And there's all the different shows. Every show we've had is listed there. Plus there's photos of all these different people and things we've talked about. And I also put the shows that I'm a guest on. So like I would add your show into that. So I think the website's probably a good one. But if they want to send me an email, it's a small medium at large podcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, and if you could leave the audience with a message about life itself, what would you say?
I'd say I'm learning and I'm still learning, and that there's always room for growing and making changes in your life. But that to me, the most important thing is, what can we do to serve and help others on our traveling in through life? And what are the things we can offer to help other people along? And that it's a lesson I have to keep learning myself over and over again, which is living in the moment and living in this day and not thinking about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow, but really to live in the moment and in today. And also I really like to say that silly saying of go with the flow, but that I feel is a really important thing. And none of these things that I'm saying am I 100% at doing. I have to keep reminding myself. I have to remember when a situation happens and I really want to react angrily, that's really not going to benefit me. How can I step back and take a deep breath and not get involved in something that really doesn't need to be that way? How can I keep it positive?
Yeah.
So, and the last would be is laughter. I feel like laughter is the most important. It's healed me through tremendous traumatic childhood experiences, which are also the things that I think developed me to become more psychic. I didn't want to discuss them in this show, but I feel like those things are all teachings. So sometimes when we have a bad experience, we think, oh, and I hate that person, they did this to me. Well, sometimes you might look at it and say, wait a minute, that was a teaching. I should be grateful that that person taught me to be more loving or more forgiving, and that there's always room to grow.
Yeah. The interesting thing, just to leave it on that note, is that in listening to you and hearing you, the child within you is still speaking, and you're still in touch with that child, and that place of wonder and inspiration. So yeah. So I want to thank you, Gail, for joining me today and giving me the opportunity to speak with you, because for me, I'd rather speak to a person like yourself. Some people like movie stars and people like, you know, who are in a different genre. But I think the life lessons and the ability for us, as you did, as we mentioned, surrender and live. And you're an example to that. So thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoy sharing my stories. And as Dean had said to me when I said to him, so why do you say I'm psychic or whatever? He said, you have no filters. And that's the real truth. I didn't end up having a lot of filters in front, so stuff comes in.
Yeah.
So if you have children at home, try not to put too much Bubba Minds in there.
All right. On that note, I'm going to play Native New York as we leave. All right, Gail. Thank you so much.
Thank you and have a great and wonderful week.